Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince and Other Writings. We are on chapter 17 on cruelty and mercy and whether it is better to be loved or feared or the contrary. Yeah. Bismillah, let's begin. Proceeding to the other qualities mentioned before, I say that every prince should desire to be considered merciful and not cruel. Now, how many people saw that coming from Machiavelli? So, desire to be merciful and not cruel. Now, cruelty that's a tough one because I think if we really look into the depths of ourselves, we could all definitely be cruelty. And that's one reason why I have such when I came across the character Ramsay Bolton, that one is interesting because he's cruel. And if you're given some ability to do something like that, because you're the son of the Lord, that is intense, isn't it? It's really a complex question, to be loved or feared. I mean, it's such a tough one. It really is, because remember when Sulla spared Caesar, and Caesar spared his enemies and they shanked them? Yeah, there's something to that. Nevertheless, he must take care not to use his mercy badly. So to use your mercy with caution, right? Cesare Borgia was considered cruel. Okay, cool. So now, Cesare, but there was a Borgia Pope. His dad was a Pope. I want to read his biography then. Let's see. Still, his cruelty brought order to the Romagna, united it, and restored it to peace and loyalty. If this is considered carefully, it will be seen that he was much more merciful than the Florentine people, who, to avoid a reputation for cruelty, allowed Pistoia to be destroyed. A prince, therefore, must not mind acquiring a bad reputation for cruelty in order to keep his subjects united and loyal. Okay, so this is interesting. So, united and loyal. It makes me think about how we have the death penalty for apostasy in Islam. You know, it's interesting when you look at how you have to be loyal to the faith. You have to be united as an ummah. You're not supposed to harm another Muslim in any bad way. Have a unitedness and a loyalty to your fellow Muslim, right? And if you think about even like in the mafias, what we know, because a lot of things are still secretive, if you wanted to leave, you will sleep with the fishes, right? Isn't that the saying? If you commit treason, which is the opposite of loyalty to the United States government, in the past, you get the death penalty. If you were doing an insurrection, which is causing disunity, well, you could be charged with treason and you could be given the death penalty. So, no matter which way you look at it, a lot of systems will punish you for causing disunity and for being disloyal. For with very few examples of cruelty, he will be more merciful than those who, because of too much mercy, allow disorder to continue. Aha! Yes! Too much mercy. So, liberals have too much mercy on crimes. So for criminals, they're like, oh, AOC literally said some people were looting because they want bread. Meanwhile, they're taking Flamin' Hot Cheetos, soda cans, packs of gum and some shoes, not like cans of beans and rice. They're just looting the loot. And this has allowed more chaos to ensue and for businesses to have to flee communities, which leaves law-abiding citizens without stores, from which spring killing and plundering. Exactly. You see, he has an excellent point here. If you allow too much disorder to continue because you want to be soft on crime, this causes more murders and plundering because criminals have nothing to fear. Liberal atheists love sometimes in America pretending that you just have to be super soft and teddy bear-like with violent criminals. That you don't need to use fear as a deterrent. You have to, like, say you can get your GED in prison. You know? Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. For these usually harm the whole community. Yes, so look at Cash Jordan on YouTube when he talks about how the soft on crime policies have affected New York City and how many places have been continually looted. While the executions that come from the prince just harm particular individuals. Yes, see, exactly. So someone could be a felon and they take the punishment instead of the whole community. I made myself a nice iced English breakfast tea with the brown sugar vanilla extract syrup that I made with some half and half from grass-fed cows, organic. Mashallah, it's really good. All the executions, they are just for that individual. So instead of being super merciful to criminals, which affect the whole community, being soft on crime, be I don't want to say cruel, but be firm and resolute with that particular criminal. And more than all other princes, a new prince cannot avoid reputation for cruelty, because new states are always full of dangers. And Virgil, speaking through Dido's mouth, says, Res dura et regni novitas metalia cogunt moliri et lat fines custodi tueri. Okay, tell me what that means. Oh my gosh, don't make me go all the way to the back of the book for that. Oh, how dare you. Oh, I'm sorry, fam. He doesn't have the annotation right there. Maybe he will later at the end of the chapter. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. Whew. Harsh necessity and the newness of my reign forced me to take such measures and to watch over my borders with a widespread guard. Whew, okay. I thought he was gonna leave us hanging there, fam. I got scared. Nevertheless, he must be slow to believe and act. So caution, patience, not rushing, not brash, not impulsive. Although he should not make himself afraid of his own shadow, he must proceed in such a way, tempered, with prudence and humanity. Okay, so tempered, prudence, and humanity. That too much confidence does not make him rash. Oh, I literally just said that. And too much distrust does not render him unbearable. From this there arises a dispute, whether it is better to be loved than feared, or the contrary. The reply is that one should like to be both, the one and the other. But as it is difficult to bring them together, it is much safer to be feared than to be loved if one of the two has to be lacking. So he just mentioned it's ideal to have both, but if one's lacking, better to be feared. Fear, love. Okay. So the age-old question. Isn't that like, for example, the Queen of Thorns in Game of Thrones? She's telling Daenerys, like, no one was more loved than her granddaughter. But none of them were able to do anything for her when her time came. And Cersei chose to use fear, didn't she? And Dany, she had love that went for a while. Misa, and Meereen and whatnot. But her Unsullied and Dothraki, they are feared armies. They're ruthless. And her dragons were feared. And she torched King's Landing and chose to be feared. So, Ned Stark was respected, but he still lost his head. You know? So, but then Roose Bolton tells Ramsay Bolton, you know, you don't want to be seen as like an unhinged, I'm paraphrasing, you know, when he gives him the talk about being too cruel because of the flaying and the torture and whatnot. Oh, you know, you won't be able to be trusted in that way, but it's something to think about. Like, there's different types of fear. Like, Varys was feared because of the secrets he knew. And Littlefinger was feared because you didn't know what treachery plots he was up against. You know, Robert Baratheon had the fear because he just had raw wrath and war. And the North was feared because of their winter-like territory, which would make it hard for summer knights to go there and wage war because they're not familiar with the terrain, and it's very cold and rigid. And so, and then the Thens beyond who lived beyond the wall were cannibals, so they were feared for something. Each group has something to be feared about them, right? The Lannisters were feared because of their access to gold, and Tywin's willingness to do a red wedding. And remember, if you recall, how they got the song "The Rains of Castamere." They made that song their mantra. And if you remember, and now the rain weeps o'er their halls, and not a soul to hear. So they took out their enemies to such a degree that it was like, wow. And they were the house that was underneath them. They wanted to take the next step up to be the hegemonic house. They got taken out. And then the Lannisters were such badasses that they took that song to put fear in everyone else. You see what I mean? So every house, and like the Greyjoys, we do not sow. That tells you right there that they don't grow crops or do banking. No, they're gonna take what they want. And then the Iron Bank in Game of Thrones was also to be feared. The Iron Bank will have its due because you have to pay them what you owe, or else. And if Tywin knew he had to pay them, well, they could make or break you, couldn't they? They could fund your enemy. Stannis Baratheon had to go over there and beg him for money, didn't he? Because whoever the bank's back's gonna have more. Except Cersei had the Golden Company, but that didn't protect her from Dragonfire. So, but if dragons were not in the equation, it would have been a different story. You see? So now, if you look at, even in the show Gladiator, Commodus, Marcus Aurelius' son, in the show, he isn't necessarily feared, he's just not respected, whereas Maximus is loved, but still it didn't protect his wife and son, did it? Right? They were still torched and hung. You know? There's all kinds of different examples, truly. So it's not an easy question. I think I would choose fear. I think I would. I would love. I don't have much. I was abandoned by my mom and dad. My grandparents didn't really raise me very long. And I lived on my own at 17. I've had other tragedies. So love has never been something I've felt safe with, as in I've never felt protected because of love. I love only my children. So, to be loved for me, it's like, yeah, you have that desire, but if you've grown up not even being loved, but fear, that can do a lot. And that's why so many people join gangs. You want to be feared. Someone messes with you, you want them to be absolutely terrified of what you're capable of. Let me know what you think. For this can be said of men in general, that they are ungrateful, fickle hypocrites, and dissemblers, avoiders of dangers, greedy for gain, and while you benefit them, they are entirely yours, offering you their blood, their goods, their life, their children, as I said above, when need is far away. But when you actually become needy, they turn away. Ain't that the truth? Huh, I even saw that in the YouTube world. People who liked me when I was coming up, and then for some reason, some people invented like just boycott campaigns. Then when I would go to those content creators and be like, hey, I have this issue that I want to talk about, like about being a homemaker, or why it's important for women to cook for their husbands, all of a sudden it was like, oh no, we can't do content with you anymore. So they liked me when they could get views, but now they don't want to work with me because they think I'll hurt their views. So it never really was about me. It was just about what they could get. Whereas I'll talk to, if you notice, I talk to people who have like not even big followings. For me, it's about seeking truth. You know, that's what it's about. I'm not looking for clickbait. I'm not monetized, so I don't benefit from the views and stuff like that. It doesn't. All the accounting will be with Allah. But when I was in need of like trying to get out of the shadow ban, and there are people who they didn't have a shadow ban, they didn't want to help me anymore because they were afraid that they would get targeted and that they would lose followers. It's fascinating. So that's very true. And if you look in your own life, you can see where he's coming from. And the prince who has made their word his entire foundation, finding himself stripped of other preparations, will be ruined. For friendships which are acquired for a price and not through grandeur and nobility of spirit are bought, but not are truly owned, and when the time arrives they cannot be spent. Now let's look at that for a second. So when you get famous, like, for example, let's take Andrew Tate. You be friends with him, you're gonna get some hoes, you're gonna get some views, which transfer into money because he's the hot patati. But all his that's a bought friendship. That's a bought something. It's not because he's an exceptional human being. A pimp who takes people's daughters and makes them shove things in their rectum and do oral intimacy on pot-bellied guys for money is not, you know, somebody of nobility. It's just not a grandeur spirit. And men have less hesitation about offending one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. Have less less hesitation. So read that. There's more hesitation to insult someone you fear than someone you love. That's what he's saying. And ain't that the truth? When you tell truth to a tyrant, that's bold. When you tell the truth to someone you love, it can be a mercy, right? Because you love them, you say it in a different way, you know? Don't you? That's an interesting thing. So, when someone loves you, they might insult you. I've experienced that. I see exactly what he's saying. Because I knew some women who, you better be careful what you say. Because in California, people die over some stupid shit they say. That's a phrase we have here. People die every day over some they say. Like that's, who said that also in a rap song? I think it was either Ice Cube, Eazy-E, or Dr. Dre. One of those guys. But it's well known that you better be very careful with the way you talk to some people. But someone who is like super soft and like, ooh, you can say whatever you want. Now, we are as Muslims, if someone comes at us with harsh words, we're told to be patient with the ignorant, right? So there's a balance. But that doesn't deny the fact that a lot of people, they're not just going to speak out so willy-nilly if they fear you. And men have less hesitation about offending one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. For love is held together by a chain of obligation, which, because men are sadly wicked, is broken at every opportunity to serve their self-interest. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment, which never abandons you. Fear is maintained by the dread of punishment. Now let's tell that to a liberal atheist when they want to be soft on crime. They say, oh, being harsh on punishment is not a deterrent. Okay, well, giving them a basket of bread and a kiss on the cheek, telling them they can get their GED, that's not going to deter them either. But if you're like, your punishment will be that you'll hang from the tree and be food for crows, or we'll put you in a tank full of sharks, that's the dread of punishment. So dread of punishment. Now, if you are too cruel, then you're never really gonna get honest advisors because everyone's afraid to say something to you. Like, some have said Caligula was one who enjoyed the spectacle of treating people bad, but there has been cases, right, where there's been lore passed down where certain kings, you said something and they take your tongue, they take your eyes. That a cruel king who enjoys cruelty, he keeps himself isolated from good advisors because no one wants to upset his temperament because they are so off the cuff. You don't really know what's coming and people dread the punishment, so they don't speak the truth. But then there is this angle of, if you betray so-and-so, well, you know it's coming. I think the Narcos show an example of that. When you look at how the Narcos in Mexico took out Valentin Elizalde, they put his SUV filled with so many bullets, and he had a song called A Mis Enemigos, and, well, they made an example of him. And so people, they became fearful. Nevertheless, a prince must make himself feared in such a way that if he does not gain love, he does avoid hatred. For to be feared and not to be hated can go very well together. Ooh, that's a great point. So, hatred and then fear. So how do you make them fear you without hating you? Think about how we fear Allah, but we don't hate Allah. We know Allah is swift in accounting, and He knows He's the most merciful. But we are to be very... We're not supposed to say, God is love. We're all His children. No, we're slaves of Allah. Allah is to be feared. Allah is to be obeyed. Allah is to be worshipped. And this He will always achieve if He does not touch the goods and the women of His citizens and subjects. And when He is obliged to shed some blood, He should do so when there is proper justification and manifest cause. So, proper justification, manifest cause. So, manifest cause. But above all, he must abstain from taking the property of others. Aha, property. For men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. Besides, reasons for taking property are never lacking, and he who begins to live by stealing always finds a reasons for taking what belongs to others, whereas reasons for shedding blood are rarer and exhausted sooner. So, when you see how some people hate private property rights, excuse me, how some communists in America, they really abhor private property. They resent those who can afford a house, and they really want to raise taxes on people and make it harder for others to own a house and have communal housing. And if you defend your home with stand your ground laws and castle doctrine, they don't think you should have a right to stop an intruder in your home, that you should just stay. Which is why they allow squatters. Notice how the liberals in New York and in California have allowed squatters' rights, which is a theft and violation of property rights. The squatter has no right to that property. The person who owns it, who's paid on it, who pays taxes on it, they have the right. And squatting is a form of theft, and liberals protect the theft. Think about that. But when the prince is with his army and has under his command a multitude of soldiers, then it is absolutely necessary not to care about being thought cruel. Okay, so when the prince is with his army and has under his command a multitude of soldiers, then it is absolutely necessary not to care about being thought cruel, for without this reputation no one has ever kept an army united or ready for any feat of arms. So here he's getting at that you have to have a certain level of fear, inspiration in you to keep your soldiers in line. And who wants to unite behind someone who's weak and fickle? That's why I think Joe Biden's one of the worst presidents in U.S. history, because he's demoralizing. He's sickly, frail, brittle, a disgrace. When he was younger, it was different. Maybe he was more talkative. Like, if you see him, I think when he was like in his 50s, you know, he's totally different than the disheveled, broken man that he is now, eating ice cream. You know, it's not like he's some old, wise man who's got, like, scars on him and he's just, like, chewing tobacco and spitting it on the ground. Like, you know, he's not some Clint Eastwood. He's a dementia patient. And America is a military-based empire. And, you know, they've allowed rainbow people in there, and there's been like drag queen ads for the military that, you know, that's not what war is. And so it's fascinating to see this angle here because it's true. And then you see how China and Russia are talking to their soldiers. Even if you go and look at some African countries and see how their men are, you're like, wow, you know. I remember, if you look at also Haiti, they're going through a problem right now with the gangs. There's been some cannibalism from the footage I've watched. And if you are a leader and you are capable of eating another human, that's pretty cruel. And the soldiers, if they still follow you, they're not gonna mess around as much as they would if they had someone fickle like Joe Biden. Someone now under pressure. It's just not the same. But again, liberals are very strange in their mind. They don't like strength. They think every type of strength is fascism. They got that special word in their head. When they see a strong leader, they don't like it. And they think they can maintain America as a force of power with being soft and like butterfly-ish, but at the same time creating drones and other eugenicist operations. It's very bizarre. It's so utterly bizarre. Among the marvelous accomplishments of Hannibal, there is reckoned this one, that although he had an enormous army composed of countless races and nations of men, and led it to fight in foreign lands, there never arose any dissension either among the rank or file or against the prince, no more when his fortune was bad than when it was good. Okay, so Hannibal. I've heard about him, but I haven't read about him, so we should read about him. So, marvelous accomplishments, he says. So, countless races and different nations. So, multiculturalism. Huh. A lot of people say if you have multiculturalism, you fail. Because they're not tied. Maybe that's why he was marvelous, because he, like, the king beyond the wall, before Stannis' fire witch burned him, he united all those tribes and got them to march on the wall. So that reminds me of what he's saying here about Hannibal. If you look how, when the settlers were coming, colonists, pioneers, pilgrims, immigrants, when they were coming over here to America, before it was called America, there was all these confederacies of the tribes, and they fought with each other, but there was times where they would try to be like, hey, we all have to come together and take out these people coming in. Well, they didn't really get united enough, and they lost. So, a person who can get different groups together to fight behind him is something. If you look how Islam is a religion, not a race, then you would see that Islam comes before your race, right? So that's something where if we had a caliphate, he's going to be the leader of the Muslims, and we're all going to unite behind him. And so all the Muslims of China or of Ethiopia or Nigeria, France, Italy, we're all Muslims, even though we're all different nations, part of different nations, different nationalities, different ethnicities. You see? So that's the power of Islam, is that it's not based on race or regional locality, but rather the creed of Islamic monotheism, that we are all slaves of Allah, that we are believers. It's very fascinating. It's not about the bloodline, but rather, if our hearts are like firm on Tawheed, we have said our Shahada, right? This could not have arisen from anything other than that inhuman cruelty of his, which, together with his countless abilities, virtue, always made him a figure of awe and terror in the sight of his soldiers. So made him a figure of awe and terror in the sight of his soldiers. And without that, his other abilities, virtue, would not have sufficed to produce the effect. So fear produces an effect in your soldiers. Your soldiers are going to win your war. And less thoughtful writers admire this accomplishment of his, and on the one hand, and on the other, condemn the principal reason for it. And that it is true that his other capabilities, virtue, would not have sufficed, can be seen from the case of Scipio, a most rare man, not only in his own times, but in all of recorded history, whose armies in Spain rebelled against him. This arose from nothing other than his excessive mercifulness. Excessive mercifulness, mentioning Scipio. Scipio, his armies in rebellion, the ones in Spain, okay, which gave more license to his soldiers and was fitting for military discipline. Aha! So you got to be careful what you give license to, and then know the balance of discipline. He was reproached with this in the Senate by Fabius Maximus, and was called the corrupter of the Roman army. The Locrians have been savaged by one of Scipio's officers, were not avenged by him, nor was the insolence of that officer corrected, all of which arose from his easygoing nature. Easygoing nature. We're just noticing something here. You need to use your mercy in the right way. Easygoing, I just want to go along to get along, man. Go with the flow. Well, you're ruling soldiers here, okay? People who are commanded to eliminate others. People who are capable of that are managed in a different way. So that someone in the Senate who wanted to excuse him said that there were many men who knew how not to err better than how to correct errors in others. Over time, this disposition would have damaged Scipio's fame and glory if he had persevered in it while supreme military commander, but since he lived under the rule of the Senate, this harmful quality of his was not only concealed, but brought him glory. I conclude, therefore, returning to the question of being feared and loved, that since men love at their own will and fear at the will of the prince, a wise prince must build his foundation on what is his own, and not on what belongs to others. He must only contrive to escape hatred, as was said. Wow. Okay, that's potent. So, men love at their own will, but fear comes from the prince. So you can't make someone love you, but you can make them fear you. Basically realizing that love is harder to get than fear. Isn't that interesting? You gotta love me unconditionally. Fear me. You need to make sure you're just not hatred. So you can be feared without being hated. Being feared without being hated. Commanding respect and building their reputation. Okay, so it says some fun facts here. Machiavelli's word for mercy here is pieta, which no single English word can translate, for it means both piety in the sense of religious devotion and pity or mercy in the sense of feeling sorrow for the suffering of others. So mercy here in generally throughout the translation, but the other meaning is never excluded when the word appears. And then number 2, Pistoia was divided into 2 factions, the Panikiatiki and the Cancellieri. And in 1501 and 1502, when the conflict broke out between them, the Florentines, who controlled the city, refused to intervene, allowing the 2 factions to tear the city apart. Wow. Kind of like when BLM rioted. The liberals allowed them to go on and on and on and on, and some of those places never recovered. That was wild. Amid 563-64, harsh necessity of the newness of my reign forced me to take such measures and to watch over my borders with a widespread guard. That was the Latin phrase we read, remember? Hannibal, 247-183 BCE, was a Carthaginian general who repeatedly beat the Romans during the Second Punic War, 219-201, until he was defeated by Scipio in 202, and fled to Syria and then to Bithynia, where he finally poisoned himself lest he fall into the hands of his enemies. Oh, wow. Machiavelli's chief source of information on him is Livy. His reference to Hannibal's inhumane cruelty is a direct translation of the phrase in Livy. Oh, History of Rome. Okay, so Livy has a History of Rome. Okay, let's write that down. Another book. Livy, History of Rome book. Have quite a few books on Rome, but don't mind adding another. Ha ha. On Scipio, okay, his troops rebelled in Spain in 206 BCE. See Livy History of Rome, 28-24. Fabius Maximus, mentioned below, was Quintus Fabius Maximus Conquistador, d. 203 BCE. What a name. Wow. He was a great opponent of Hannibal in the first defensive phase of the Second Punic War, and his policy in cautiously refusing to engage in battles he knew he would lose earned him the sobriquet of Conquistador, the hesitator. Oh, that's what it means? He was also an opponent of Scipio in the Senate, for his accusation that Scipio was the corrupter of the Roman army. So we have to, it says see Livy, History of Rome as well. So here we can see the author has immense respect for Livy. Scipio took the southern Italian city of Locri in 205 BCE and placed it under the control of Quintus Flaminius, who proceeded to pillage it. Never rebuked for his actions by Scipio, he was eventually arrested and punished by the Senate. Oh wow. Another source says what's in Livy History of Rome. Fascinating. I love it. Okay, the next one will be how princes must keep their word. Boom. Keep your oaths. That's something we also have in Islam. Great read, I must say. Totally want to read more about Hannibal. We learned about Scipio. That essentially it is better to be feared, but just not hated. Because love is at a person's own will, whereas fear is at the will of the prince, of the person. And it's fear is maintained by the dread of punishment. So, cruelty versus being feared. Right? So you can be feared without necessarily being cruel. Like, flogging isn't cruel. But liberals, oh, it's so horrible. Why would you flog somebody? Meanwhile, they're like, ugh, yeah, the death penalty is cruel for that person who executed children in the street. They just should be in life in prison and never have to work again, and have access to the booties of men and homemade wine, and Pruno it's called. Oh, death penalty is so barbaric. It's fascinating, man. Just look at history and just see what it is. And so remember, he said, proper justification, manifest cause. Okay? That Scipio had too easygoing nature. Okay? And friendships that are for a price, and they're not through grandeur or nobility, they can't really truly be owned. And that the time will come when you need to have like some aid, and well, you'll see that they're gonna break that opportunity because men are wicked. And they're gonna serve their self-interests. And then recall that he mentioned you don't want to have a bad reputation for being cruel, but you don't want to have too much mercy, which allows disorder to continue. Because if you allow too much disorder to continue, you're going to allow way too much killing and plundering, which will harm the whole community. And manifest proof of that is what liberals have done to New York City, and especially the Bay Area and Los Angeles, concerning crime. Okay? Mentally ill people smoking meth on the streets, they say, oh, it's fine, but it's caused a whole bunch of problems. So much mercy. They think it's merciful to let someone smoke crystal meth until their teeth are falling out as they lay in the street. That is meaner to take their tent down and put them in a forced facility. That's mean, but making everyone else have to walk past someone who's defecating on themselves and vomiting, or mumbling and walking in the freeway with no shoes, that's mercy, you see? So look how he talks about mercy, and then how modern liberal atheists today talk about mercy from the American perspective. Because there is a difference with like a French atheist than an American one, right? Okay. And so he also mentioned that don't be afraid of your own shadow, but you have to proceed in a way where you have prudence, humility, tempered. Don't be rash. Be well measured. Okay? You don't just fly off the handle. Perfect. Very insightful. If you'd like to support my work and read more about what I write, you can do so by going to www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there. Join it. Join the blog. Fear me and join the blog.